Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Anita Dupree delivers shocking news and says her goodbyes after the concert ends. This performance, one she poured her heart into, was more than a show. It was her final bow, her farewell to the life she once held on to. Anita knew what this night meant, even if those around her didn't fully grasp the gravity. The lights dimmed, the crowd roared, and for a brief moment, all seemed suspended in time. But before Anita could speak her truth, chaos took the stage. It began subtly. Samantha, eyes glossy from emotion, approached Smitty with a plea that cracked the air like lightning. She wanted a family. Not just in name or tradition, but in wholeness. She wanted Martin back. Her voice wavered with desperation as she begged Smitty to give Martin a second chance to let their family heal. Her words, raw and unrehearsed, struck a nerve in Smitty. The tension that had boiled between him and Martin for months, maybe years, now hung in the balance. Smitty looked over at Martin, whose face was locked in a mix of shame and longing. And for a moment, the bitterness dissolved into something closer to understanding. But peace, as it often does in their world, was short-lived. No sooner had one fire been smothered than another ignited. Nicole, who had been holding herself together for Anita's sake, found herself face-to-face with Leslie. The two had a long history of conflict, and tonight, Leslie's barbed comments hit their mark. Nicole tried to remain calm, but Leslie kept pushing, pressing on old wounds, needling her with smug grins and sideways jabs. It was deliberate, and it worked. Nicole snapped. Words escalated into shouting, and then came the shoving, the grabbing, the chaos. The audience, once enthralled by Anita's final act, now turned toward the growing storm between Nicole and Leslie. What was meant to be a night of reverence spiraled into a spectacle. Phones were raised. Whispers became shouts. All eyes abandoned Anita. And yet, it was Anita herself who brought it all back. She stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding, slicing through the noise. "Enough," she said. Just one word, but it landed with the weight of her legacy. The room quieted. Nicole and Leslie, still caught in the heat, froze as Anita moved between them. She looked first at Nicole, then Leslie, then the crowd. Then, Anita finally spoke the words she had carried for so long. She announced that she would retire, not temporarily, not conditionally, permanently. No more concerts. No more appearances. Her career, the very thing that defined her for decades, would come to a close. A stunned silence followed, the weight of her announcement sinking in like a stone. She went on to explain, her voice tinged with sorrow, that her decision wasn't just about time or exhaustion. It was about Barbara. The pain of losing her friend and mentor was still sharp, an open wound that never quite healed. Anita confessed that music had become a reminder of everything she had lost. And despite her strength, the weight had become too much to carry. The room was still as Anita shared her truth. And even though she didn't need to say Barbara's name out loud, everyone knew. Barbara's absence was a presence in itself, a ghost in the wings. Anita's confession wasn't just about mourning, it was about release. She was freeing herself from the cage of memories. Then came the question on everyone's mind, what about the pending contract with Devin Hamilton Winters? Rumors had swirled that Anita was set to collaborate on a major project under his label, a partnership that could have reshaped the industry. But Anita was firm. She would not be moving forward. Instead, she suggested Tracy or Sharon might step in. Both were trusted, capable, and most importantly, ready. Anita's endorsement carried weight, and her words made it clear that the legacy would continue, just not through her. As Anita stepped back from the mic, the air was thick with disbelief. Some faces were tear-streaked, others frozen. Her choice had not just marked the end of an era, but the start of something unknown. The family she had built around her, fractured as it was, stood on the edge of transformation. Samantha, still reeling from the earlier conflict, turned to Martin. Her plea to Smitty had opened a door, but the next step was theirs to take. Martin reached for her hand, and while she hesitated for a moment, she didn't pull away. It was a small gesture, but powerful. It signaled a crack in the wall between them. The possibility of healing. Smitty watched in silence, his expression unreadable. His grudges with Martin were deep-rooted, born from betrayal and mistrust, but Samantha's words had hit him where it hurt most. He knew what it meant to lose someone before making amends. The sting of unresolved pain. And though he didn't speak it, something in his demeanor softened. Leslie, meanwhile, stood off to the side, the chaos she had sparked now smoldering. Nicole, red-faced and breathing heavily, tried to compose herself. Anita's intervention had embarrassed them both, but more than that, it forced them to reflect. Nicole stormed off to the back, muttering something under her breath, while Leslie remained in the spotlight, her expression shifting from triumph to something closer to regret. In the aftermath, the venue slowly began to empty. The buzz of Anita's announcement, the fights, the revelations, all of it echoed like static. Backstage, the key players gathered, unsure of what to say. Anita had lit a fuse, and now they all had to live with the fallout. Tracy approached Anita quietly, her eyes full of concern. She didn't try to convince her to stay. She simply said, "I understand." And Anita smiled, that bittersweet smile that speaks more of endings than beginnings. Sharon, too, stepped forward, calm and measured as always. She offered her support without condition. If Anita needed someone to step up for the contract with Devon, she would be ready. Not out of ambition, but out of respect. The tension among the group was still thick, but beneath it, something else stirred: change. The kind that comes not with trumpets, but with a whisper. The kind that reshapes people in quiet ways. Anita's departure wasn't just a goodbye. It was a catalyst. As the night drew to a close, Anita sat alone in her dressing room, staring at a photograph of Barbara taped to the mirror. Her reflection hovered beside it, and for the first time in years, she felt both of them were at peace. Meanwhile, Samantha and Martin walked together down the back corridor, their hands tentatively linked. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer hollow, it was hopeful. Outside, Smitty lingered near the exit, lighting a cigarette he never intended to finish. He watched the sky darken, his thoughts clouded. He didn't know what came next, but he knew something had to give. Maybe it was time to stop holding on to the past like a badge. And in the empty venue, under the fading lights, Nicole sat in the front row, staring at the stage. She hadn't meant for the night to end this way. The fight, the spectacle, the loss of something sacred. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what Anita's voice sounded like when it wasn't drowned out by shouting. Leslie, somewhere backstage, took a long look at herself in the mirror. The fight with Nicole had exposed more than just anger. It had cracked something deeper. Pride. Maybe even guilt. She wondered what Anita saw in her, what Barbara had seen. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure she liked the answer. Everything had changed. The performance that was supposed to be a farewell had become a crucible. And the ones left standing had no choice but to reckon with what came next. What began as a night to honor Anita had ended as a reckoning for everyone. Each character had been forced to confront their own demons, and none of them would leave unchanged. Anita's final note wasn't just the end of her career, it was the first chord of a new, uncertain symphony. The days following the concert unfolded like a slow implosion. Anita's decision reverberated through every circle she had ever touched. What was once speculative had become certain: the matriarch of their artistic world was gone. The vacuum she left behind demanded clarity, yet all it received was turmoil. No one felt that more than Samantha. She'd opened her heart in front of the world, vouching for Martin with everything she had left. Now she found herself facing the consequences. Smitty had not spoken to her since the concert night, not in anger, but in a kind of wounded silence that was more cutting than any shouting could be. He wasn't ready to forgive Martin, but he was too tired to fight anymore. That shift created space, a quiet between them where something new might eventually grow. Martin, sensing the fragility of his second chance, kept a low profile. He didn't try to force his way back into family routines. He started small, fixing the broken porch light, taking out the trash without being asked, showing up. He didn't make speeches, didn't ask for praise. Samantha watched from a distance, uncertain whether this version of him was here to stay or just another phase in their storm-tossed history. Smitty, meanwhile, retreated to the workshop behind the house. He spent hours rebuilding an old guitar he and Martin once fought over. Every stroke of sandpaper, every turn of the tuning peg, was therapy. He wasn't ready to talk, but the act of creation reminded him of what once was. He kept hearing Samantha's voice in his head, "I want a complete family." That sentence dug in, haunting and heavy. He had thought he was protecting her by keeping Martin out. Now he wasn't so sure. Nicole didn't return calls. Not from friends, not from family. She stayed in her apartment, curtains drawn, scrolling through every video, every headline from that disastrous night. Her name had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. The fight with Leslie had eclipsed everything else. The humiliation was raw, but what hurt more was the realization that she had lost control. That all her restraint had shattered in public, ruining the one night meant to honor Anita. But the silence gave her time to think. Anita had always told her to channel pain into power, to own her truth even when it burned. Nicole began writing again, not songs, but essays. Reflections on fame, grief, anger. She didn't plan to publish the not yet. But the process reminded her of who she was before the spotlight, before the breakdowns, before Leslie. Leslie, on the other hand, rode the media wave unapologetically. She gave interviews. She laughed off the fight. She framed herself as the misunderstood provocateur, spinning the narrative her way. Yet behind the scenes, things weren't so easy. Her publicist dropped her. Sponsorship deals were suddenly postponed. And the glare of the spotlight she once craved began to feel more like exposure than validation. She called Anita twice. Left voicemails. Apologized without really apologizing. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she needed to hear Anita's voice again, to tether herself to something real. But Anita didn't return the calls. Anita was gone. She had slipped into quiet, into privacy. No tours, no press. She bought a house on the edge of the mountains, where the sky stretched wide and clear. She gardened. She read. She grieved. Tracy visited once. They sat on the porch, drinking tea, not speaking of music or of Barbara. Just the weather. The garden. The silence. And when she left, Tracy didn't ask if Anita would ever return to the stage. She knew the answer. What mattered more was that Anita had found something close to peace. Sharon took a different route. She stepped up. The Devon Hamilton Winters contract was still on the table, and Sharon knew someone had to shepherd it forward. Tracy had declined gracefully, firmly. Her heart wasn't in it. Sharon, ever the stabilizer, took the reins. She contacted Devon. Rewrote the terms slightly to better reflect the new reality. No Anita. No sweeping legacy project. Instead, a collaborative album that honored Anita's impact through the voices of those she influenced. Sharon didn't want fame from this, only fidelity. Authenticity. She curated the list of artists with care. She included Nicole, despite her breakdown. She included Martin, despite his reputation. Even Leslie got an invitation, though Sharon made clear the expectations. Professionalism. Respect. Integrity. Each invite came with a personal letter. Sharon's words were measured but warm, direct but thoughtful. And slowly, the responses began to return. Nicole said yes. With conditions. She wanted creative freedom. She wanted space. But she agreed. Martin didn't respond for a week. When he did, it was a short note. If Samantha believes in this, I'll do it. Leslie's answer was unexpected. She declined. Not because she wasn't interested, but because she didn't trust herself not to mess it up again. Her words were careful, but they carried the weight of something real. Maybe it was time to step back. Not forever. But for now. Sharon respected the decision. She didn't push. Instead, she moved forward with those who were ready. Rehearsals began in a converted church downtown. The space was bare but acoustically rich. The first session was awkward. Nicole avoided eye contact. Martin stayed quiet. Tension thickened the air like smoke. But Sharon kept them moving. Track by track. Line by line. She wasn't Anita, and she didn't try to be. But her calm steadied the room. By the third session, something shifted. Nicole sang a verse she'd written just days before. It was raw, full of fire and vulnerability. Martin picked up the guitar and followed. Their eyes met, just briefly. And in that moment, the music stitched something back together. Samantha came to one of the later sessions, sitting in the back, watching as Martin found rhythm again. She didn't say much, just listened. Afterward, they walked home in silence, his hand brushing hers not pulling away. The album slowly took form. Not a tribute to Anita in the traditional sense, but a reflection of the ripples she left behind. Pain, redemption, fracture, reunion. It wasn't always pretty, but it was real. Meanwhile, Leslie booked a trip to Europe. Not for publicity. For herself. A writing retreat in Italy. A cabin in the hills. No entourage. No cameras. She left her phone behind. Just brought a notebook. For the first time in years, she wanted to hear her own voice again without an audience. Smitty watched the progress from afar. Samantha showed him clips sometimes. He'd grunt or nod, rarely comment. But one night, he asked her if she thought Martin really changed. She didn't answer directly. She just said, "He's trying." That was enough for now. Anita, still in the mountains, received a package weeks later. A vinyl test pressing of the new album. No note. Just her name etched on the edge of the sleeve. To A.D. We're still singing. She placed it on the player, sat back, and listened. The opening track was Nicole's. Then Martin. Then a duet. Sharon's spoken word interlude followed, raw and poetic. She smiled. Cried. Laughed. Not because it was perfect, but because it lived. Barbara would have loved it. Anita closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. The past wasn't undone. The grief still lingered. But in the voices of the ones she left behind, there was something close to healing. And beyond the silence, beyond the gates of everything she'd once built, there was still a song playing. Not hers. Theirs. Months passed, and the echoes of Anita's farewell began to settle into something more permanent. The album released quietly, but was met with fierce loyalty from longtime fans and new listeners alike. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it didn't need to be. Its resonance came from the honesty layered into every track. It told a story not just of a woman leaving the stage, but of those left to carry the melody. The final track, an instrumental co-composed by Sharon and Martin, was called The Garden. It was wordless but profound, a tribute to the place Anita had chosen for her retreat from the spotlight. It ended on a sustained, unresolved no deliberate, as if saying the story wasn't finished. Anita listened to the album again on a rainy afternoon. The mountains were cloaked in mist, and the garden outside her window pulsed with life. That unresolved final note stuck with her. There was something haunting about it. It was an invitation, a breath held. Back in the city, Samantha received an invitation in the mail. Not from a label, not from Sharon, but from Anita herself. A handwritten note on textured paper. Dinner. No press. Just us. Bring Martin. If you want. It was a peace offering. Maybe a blessing. Samantha didn't hesitate. They drove up a week later, quiet most of the way, the weight of what might come heavy in the car. When they arrived, Anita greeted them with that same old smile, calm, steady, knowing. Martin hugged her. Tightly. No words. Over dinner, they didn't talk about music. They talked about Barbara's terrible jokes. About childhood memories. About the stars over the mountains. Anita didn't ask Martin if he'd changed. She didn't need to. He was there, and that mattered. Later that night, Anita pulled Samantha aside. They sat on the porch, a soft breeze moving through the trees. You were always the anchor, Anita said. Even when you didn't know it. Samantha swallowed hard. It never felt like enough. That's how you know it was. In another part of the world, Leslie stood in the middle of a vineyard in Tuscany. She had started writing again. Not for a label or an audience, just for herself. Every morning she woke early and let the silence teach her something new. Her latest work wasn't about fame. It was about reckoning. She had mailed a letter to Nicole. No apologies, no justifications. Just a paragraph that ended with, "I hope you're singing again. You always had the better voice." Nicole read the letter 3 times. She didn't write back. But she did keep it in her drawer. And she did keep singing. The Devon Hamilton Winters project had become more than just a tribute album. Sharon, now at the helm of a quiet revival label, began producing more collaborative works, pulling in voices from the fringes, voices that had been silenced by grief or scandal. She found power in creating space for others to be heard. And her reputation grew not for chasing stardom, but for building a place where legacy and innovation met. Tracy returned to her roots, quietly mentoring a new generation of performers. She never took the spotlight, but her presence became known behind the scenes. Artists whispered her name with reverence, knowing that if Tracy showed up to a rehearsal, you were doing something right. Smitty finally handed the guitar to Martin. The old one they had rebuilt together. No speech. Just a nod. That single gesture marked a shift. A truce. A beginning. And so they all continued. Not perfectly, but honestly. The final chapter wasn't written in headlines or show-stopping performances. It came in the quiet after applause. In long drives and longer silences. In letters that may never get answered. In music that no longer needed to be heard to be felt. One evening, as Anita stood barefoot in her garden, twilight falling over the trees, she hummed something soft and unfinished. A melody not meant for the stage but for the soil, for the air, for herself. It wasn't a comeback. It wasn't a performance. It was a song. Still playing. Still hers.